Hey there, Jester here. Pumpkin and I are going to be doing today's craft. Now, there does come a time in every clown's life that she must do something a little more serious. Instead of my usual good enough arts and crafts, I have been called upon to make a furniture quality, classy box for something. But I haven't done proper wood staining in decades, so I need to do a little bit of experimenting first before I get to that particular project. So I have a little wooden box from the dollar store that I've prepared with all the sanding that it needs to do. And originally my thought had been to get some laser cut corner filigree to glue on, because I thought that would make it look even fancier. But I didn't have that. Instead I have laser cut Halloween wood pieces. And I decided that really was more our speed. So I glued those on. So this will be the box that I am testing my stain on to make sure that the colors are what I expect, and to see exactly how the varnish finish will look. And because we do tend to be a little, since buying proper stains and proper varnish is expensive, this is not really a doing it for fun craft. This is you have it left over from something else, or in my case, you need to do something else off camera. And this is just a test. But I will also be experimenting with a budget version to see if I can get a similar effect with acrylic paint and craft varnish. And as you can see, no cuffs and sleeves rolled up today. And for once in my life, I will be wearing these little gloves, protective gloves, because most of the time I figure whatever I get on my hands will wash off. But furniture stain, maybe not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first put a reddish stain on, and then over top of that I will put a dark brown, and then over top of that I will put a few coats of varnish. So to start that, I have my reddish stain. Gotta give that a good shake. And I'm going to put that in a little cup, just to make it easier to get the sponge in. Because the instructions on it say that you should apply it with a sponge. I didn't, purchase proper applicator sponges. I just cut up a regular sponge. So, actually, start with the bottom piece, just to make sure we know what we're doing. I'm going to just dip that in and spread along with the grain. And that's going to make some very horrible sounding noises, but that's all right. There we go. I'm going to, oops, I'm not going to finish that yet. I'm going to let that dry a little bit while before I flip this over and do the inside. I will now work on this part, which is going to be a little trickier since I've got these, my little creatures on here. I squish that in. Nice and tight. That should give me okay. So that is proper wood stain. Now, to compare the official wood stain with a budget version, I'm going to first put the proper wood stain on this square piece, and I have a round piece that I will be putting just acrylic paint and craft glaze on. Okay, so what we're going to do for the budget version of staining is we're going to make a brown wash, which means a little bit of acrylic paint. It's not going to be the exact same colors. I don't have the exact kind of red-brown, but it will give the same idea. We're mostly going to be comparing the depth of color rather than the exact colors. So I'm going to take this and put a little bit of my reddish brown paint in there. Take some water. And I'm going to stir that up. It's definitely going to need more paint. Because really what we're doing is just making a very, very thin acrylic paint. That's all right. This is just, $2 acrylic paint versus $15 stain. Well, that I don't need to apply with a sponge. This I'm just going to use a paintbrush for. Okay, that's very red, but that's okay. That's going to give me a little time to dry. That away. Now, I can probably flip this over and do the inside. A little trickier because I need to get into these corners somehow. Now the bottom of the box I don't care about because I'm going to be putting a little bit of a liner in there. So that's going to be covered. But I'm going to get these corners because I do need the corners to be, there we go. And this is why we're using a sponge. We can really squish it in there. Okay. Now for the top, I have to do the inside. This one I do want to do the inside of the, a little more of this. inside of the lid, since I will not be lining that. It means I need to really squish into the corners with my sponge. Alright, so there is step 1, transformation from my dollar store box into something moderately classy. I will be back in half an hour or so to put the dark coat on over top, and we'll see what happens. Back in a moment. Hello again. Well, my first layer of stain has dried, so I'm going to put on my gloves and do the second layer. So what I'm wanting is a dark brown with reddish undertones, and since, you know, between myself and the helpful assistant at the paint store, we couldn't find a brown that, just a brown by itself that I liked, we decided that maybe going with a literal red undertone and then a dark brown over top would make the most sense. So get this all nice and shook up. Again, we'll be taking a sponge and sponging on the next layer of stain. Start on the table so I can squish the stain into all the little nooks and crannies of my figures. So it could be that putting these little decorations on top was not the way to go. There we go. That up. Okay, so there's the inside of that, and then we're going to take our little test piece and put our second layer of stain on that. Once again, we are going to make a brown wash for our experiment. So I've got dark brown acrylic paint, and that's going to get squished into there. A little water. Stir that up. Alright, there's our brown wash, and I'm going to put it on my, previously put a brown wash on. to let all of that dry overnight. And tomorrow I'm going to give my box another little sanding because I can feel that the stain has, you know, roughed up the surface again, so I'll be going over that with a very high grain sandpaper. And then tomorrow, hopefully, we can get our 3 coats of varnish done, which will take longer because it's an hour wait dry time for each coat. We will be back again later. Hello again. It's the next day. I've had a chance to let the stain dry, and I've given it a bit of a sanding because as soon as you put paint or stain or varnish on, you know, wood that feels perfectly smooth, it will prove you wrong. So I did learn one thing from my experiment here working with this other box before I move on to my official project that I need to do. And you can see that along the edges where I sanded it, the color did not stain in as well because, you know, when I was staining it, I was mostly focusing on the large surfaces and not carefully going over the edges as well. So the stain didn't soak into some places quite as well. So it ended up with this bit of an antiqued effect, which is not what I want for the project that I plan on doing, but, you know, for this, it's fine. This is my experiment, and I did intend to learn from it. And there you can see these little guys. This was the one that I did with the proper stain, and this is the one that I did with, you know, acrylic wash. And the acrylic wash, I mean, it does look, you know, very much like a lighter stain. You can't get, you know, a super dark color with it because it is just watered down paint. But I think if you're trying to do, you know, a budget project, it should work, you know, reasonably well. But now we need to move on to the varnishing part. So for my official varnish, this I need to put on with a brush. So that's why I don't have my protective gloves today, because, well, I'm not going to be squishing a sponge and getting stain all over myself. So I'm not too worried about that. So the problem is that this needs an hour or two drying time in between coats, and my craft varnish for my, you know, other test piece wants 3 hours. So the thing is that it's going to take, you know, minimum 6 hours to get this all properly varnished. So I think what I'm going to do is just, you know, put 1 coat on each, and then, you know, skip to the end when it's all dry tomorrow again. So start off with our proper furniture varnish. Alright, and the instructions on the pack also say that you're supposed to give it a little stir first. So I will give it a little stir. And this will be a glossy varnish. See why it wants a stir. There's some weird goop or something in there. Well, while I stir it, I will tell you a little bit about it. It is, there were various finishes, gloss, semi-gloss, satin, flat, but I liked the gloss the best. So that is what I purchased. You can also get stains that have varnish in, but I wanted the depth of the depth that you would get from having the stain on the bottom and then a top coat. Is that goop? Oh well. Set that aside. So how shall I do this? Because I won't be able to do it all at once. So I think I'm just going to do part of it and then let it dry for an hour and then come back and do the other side. So I think I'm going to start with the inside of these boxes. So, and then I'm going to need to sand between each coat of varnish as well. The package says to do 180 grit. I do not have 180 grit. The sandpaper I have 150, which is not enough. I have a 220, which I am going to use, which is finer than it needs to be, but that's okay. I would rather go finer than too rough, because I want this to be very, very smooth. And again, I'm not too worried about the inside here because I'm just going to cover that with a bit of lining to make it look more like a proper treasure chest or jewel box. It's much easier to get into the corners now because I've got a brush instead of a sponge. Okay, and that's all nice. Okay. So yes, it looks very shiny right now because it's wet, but it should keep a fair amount of shine once it's dry. So I'm going to do this other one. There we go. That should be. Yes, and you can see that my previously perfectly white brush now has some stain picked up. So this is why you need some kind of sealer over it. And then for my little test piece. There we go. Close that up. And then for my test piece, I So just be using regular craft varnish. There's that piece. And this is also, you know, glossy, so it should have much the same effect when it's dry as the furniture varnish. All right, so I'm going to be working on this off and on for the rest of the day, I expect. Now flipping it over, doing the next coat, giving a little sand in between. So I shall be back tomorrow with the finished project, or the finished product. We'll put the box back together and stick a liner in it, and we'll see how everything turned out then. Now, Pumpkin and I have some brushes to wash. Welcome back to day 3 of this particular project. Since there has been a lot of drying time due to using stain and varnish, but we're nearly done. Let's show you what we've got. So here, this is the box completed. And this here is, it's nice and smooth now because I have done, this is 3 coats of varnish, and after the first and second coats I gave it a bit of a sanding with the 220 sandpaper. So now the top coat is nice and smooth and shiny, and this is what I want my more serious project to look like. But for this one, since you can see that stain, I didn't apply it quite right, so it already has a bit of a antiqued look. For this particular box, I'm going to give it another sanding to rough it up a bit and make it look, you know, older. And for my little test pieces, this was the one done with the stain and varnish, and this is the one I did with acrylic paint and craft glaze, and they both look quite nice. So if you do want to do a faux stain and varnish on a budget, you know, acrylic paint and craft glaze will do the trick for, you know, crafting projects, dollhouse furniture, you know, a little box like that, something that isn't going to be have heavy use sort of thing, because this is full-on floor and furniture varnish, and you could, you know, walk on this without it becoming damaged. So depending on what your particular needs are, you can adjust for that. But for me, I'm going to finish off this box, and I'm going to start by scuffing it up a little. So I got the 220 out again. And we're not going to do a whole lot. Just enough to give it a little roughen up. It's not so shiny. Top. one thing I learned from, another thing I learned from this project is that putting these little figures on does make it quite difficult to, sand and varnish afterwards. Now I've got a slightly damp cloth that I'm just going to use to take off any dust. Okay. It's going to look shiny for a second while it dries again. Okay. Now I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a liner in this. So I've got some orange felt. Now normally I'd use like a red, but since this is a Halloween box, I'm going to use orange. I need to measure the inside of this. I'm just going to put it on the bottom rather than having it come up the sides. I'm doing this the easy way. On the inside, it is a problem because my glasses get in the way of that. All right. So 10 by 6, or 10 centimeters and 6 millimeters. And on the other side, 5.6. Okay, 10.6, 5.6. I'm going to measure that out on my felt. So 10.6. And it's okay if I put pencil marks on this because I'm just going to, this is going to be the side that's down. So let's see, 5.6. And 5.6. And got my scissors. I'm going to cut this up. Okay. And I got the bottom of my box. That's just going to make sure that'll fit. A little bit. Okay. Now I'm just going to put glue around the edges. Just a little bit, just enough to hold it. There we go. Which side had that side had the pencil marks. Let's flip that over. The clean side is up. And I'm just going to squish that in. There you go. Now my box has a lining. And now, put it all back together again. There you go. And I've got all the little bits here. I'm taking the glasses off again. I need to see tiny things. So I've got tiny screws. And let's start with, whoop. I really need to magnetize the tip of my screwdriver. This thing is kind of annoying. All right. Okay, and when we're doing something like this where we need to line it up, we don't put the screw all the way in at first. We put in all the screws part way. sure that they can all go in. Okay, and then we make sure everything's lined up all nice. And we finish screwing them in properly. Okay. Then we get the next one. And we do that same process. There we go. It's not perfectly straight, but you know, I didn't buy it perfectly straight either. This is I probably spent a whole $1.50, $2 on this box. There we go. Yeah. Now we have a completed Halloween box. There you go, pumpkin. Keep whatever Halloween tricks and treats that you can fit in a little box. Well, we'll figure out what to put in here later. For now, we are done with this particular project. And we are probably going to end up giving everyone we know little varnish boxes because we still have quite a bit of the expensive stain and varnish left over. But until next time, happy crafting.